It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. I was shipped out to Palmer Research Facility in Antarctica 3 months back. They told me it was a prestigious assignment, a golden step forward in my career as a research scientist. Strange first briefing meeting though. Scientists and the like from all parts of the United States. Some guy from NYC explaining the importance of our work. Another guy from New Mexico saying that this could solve the world's energy problems. Felt weird at the time, but the job opportunity was too good to miss out on. I've been given some kind of vaccine during the briefing along with everyone else present. Not sure why, but they told us everyone working for the Institute may at some point be exposed to things humanity hadn't experienced in millennia, and it was just a precaution. At first, I bought into the dream. Each morning, I'd step onto the opposite deck and stare out over a hellscape of ice that never ended. Was like standing on a dead planet. The sun barely bothered to rise during the endless winter. And the wind, Jesus, the wind screamed every day and night like it had a score to it. Well, we held on to one thing. The promise that we were on the brink of something massive, something that could metaphorically flip the world on its axis. I didn't know then that our so-called discovery would drag us into a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. Well, to be honest, the transfer orders didn't say much, just enough to make the mission sound important. Something about drilling for permafrost samples, microbial studies, unlocking secrets buried under centuries of ice. But between the lines, it felt like there was something else. A quiet warning, a sense that we weren't just poking around in the dirt for science. We were hunting something old, something dangerous. Once I got there, it was clear. The rumors I'd heard were true. I was officially contracted to a Los Angeles-based organization called the Midas Institute. But it was clear that the government also had their claws deep in this place. They weren't here for simple microbes. They were here for something ancient, something frozen under the glass that might just cheat death. The whispers in the corridor set it straight. This wasn't just biology. This was the key to slowing aging, stretching out human life for decades more, maybe even longer. It sounded insane. It also sounded like the future. And you know what? I wanted in. The team was tight, elite. Dr. CLA Noonan ran the show. A hard-as-nails microbiologist with a sharp mind and a surprisingly soft edge when it came to guiding her crew. Dr. Royston Bayes he kept to himself. A silent genius in biochemistry who worked on classified projects before vanishing into the ice with us. Nina Lopez kept the lab running, mixing chemicals, logging data, babysitting the finicky machinery. And there was Graham Park, our logistics guy. If it broke, he fixed it. If we ran out of something, he made damn sure we got more. And he kept the aging generator alive with grit and spit. There were only a handful of us, but each one mattered. The station itself was an aging relic, rebuilt and patched over the years to barely meet the standards of cutting-edge biological research. And it was still standing, still running. And beneath it, something waited. Every corridor in that place was wrapped in thick reinforced steel. Not just to keep out the bone-cutting Antarctic cold, but to cage in whatever might try to claw its way loose. Yes, the lab was a fortress. Airtight containment pods, HEPA-rated ventilation, backup generators stacked like dominoes. Every system doubled then tripled. Nothing got out. Not without a fight. The heart of it all stood the BSL-4 lab, our crown jewel. High security, locked down, a sealed tomb built to wrangle the deadliest things known to man. The lower-tier labs, BSL-2 and 3, handled the nastier bugs. Airborne stuff that could kill slow. But BSL-4, that was where the real monsters lived. This place was built like a bunker, running under constant negative pressure. Even if the walls cracked, the air would suck inward, not out. No pathogen would ever escape. At least that's what we told ourselves. The walls were smooth, chemically resistant, easy to scrub, impossible to penetrate. Not even the tiniest contaminant could slip through. Yes, Getting inside meant jumping through every hoop. The system had retinal scans, biometric locks, passcodes, layers of decontamination chambers. No shortcuts, no screw-ups. Once inside, you wore a positive pressure suit tied to an external air source that hissed and growled like a machine breathing for you. One tear, one fault, and it was game over. The only way in or out was a chain of airlocks. Each one more paranoid than the last. Chemical showers, UV blasts, sterilization routines drilled into every muscle memory. We were convinced this place was bulletproof. If we played by the rules, nothing could touch us. Well, that arrogance bled into everything. At first, it all ran like clockwork. We focused on the thawing slabs of ancient glacier, pulling microbes from the ice like ghosts from another era. We studied how they reacted to modern cells, how they lived, what they wanted. Then the tone shifted. First crack in the armor wasn't in the walls, it was in the orders. Word came down from above. Move faster. No explanation, just crates of high-end lab gear and veiled warnings from shadowy contacts. Money poured in and with it the pressure. The kind that made your skin crawl. The kind that made you wonder what we were really waking up beneath all that ice. The encrypted messages always ended the same way. Leave no stone unturned, like a whisper from someone watching behind a mirror, waiting for us to dig deeper. With the advanced gear they'd given us, we started mapping gene expressions unlike anything in any known life form. Wasn't just strange, it was revolutionary. At first, we were electrified. These microorganisms weren't just unique. They could rewrite the rules of medical science. When we started testing on rats and hamsters, locked inside sealed, pressurized habitats. Every day brought fresh data, unexpected and thrilling. Well, the animals healed faster. Some of the older ones even seemed younger, more alive, stronger hearts, cleaner lungs, clearer eyes. The messages from our handlers turned downright ecstatic. They hinted at upcoming announcements, visits from higher-level officials. The project was gaining heat fast. Remember standing beside Dr. Noonan, both of us watching a glass enclosure. Inside, a batch of rats injected with the new compound darted around like they'd been reborn. One of them, marked with a green tag, stood out. It had bounced back from a nasty respiratory infection in no time at all. Clear lungs, full energy, zero complications. That moment hit us hard. This worked on humans. We weren't just curing diseases. We might be cracking the code to aging itself. But then things shifted. Some of the test subjects started to behave off. Erratic movements, mood swings, one moment calm, the next lashing out. At first, we chalked it up to stress or environmental quirks. But then the data started screaming. Brain activity spiked in strange ways. One hamster went into a frenzy and gnawed its enclosure like it wanted out now. Left deep tooth marks in reinforced polyglass. A rat that used to be timid became a savage, attacking others in its cage without warning. We isolated the affected animals immediately and sent samples to Dr. Vasey. He ran the tests. What he found out wasn't just troubling. It was a red flag. Something was multiplying inside them fast. A new agent, unknown, aggressive. Didn't just boost cellular activity. It rewired the body, enhancing some systems while dismantling others. Like it was redesigning the host from within. Well, we hit the brakes. Full stop. Shut down the experiments to figure out what the hell we were dealing with. But our handlers, their response was calculated. Proceed with caution, they said. But keep going. The risks were secondary. The payoff was too big. The kind of breakthrough nations would kill for. The kind you don't walk away from. Tension crept in like frostbite behind the polished routines of the station. Graham Park, normally calm, unshakable, started pacing, eyes darting to the walls like he could hear them breathing. We reinforced certain sections, double-checked the generators every few hours and kept tools close at hand, like he was expecting something to blow. Nina Lopez became obsessive, triple-checking every label, every container, making sure nothing was mislabeled or unsecured. She looked over her shoulder a lot more than she had before. Felt a new and usually steady force started to grow distant, quiet. She moved like someone carrying weight no one else could see. One night, long after the lights had dimmed, she pulled me aside. She told me she couldn't sleep. Said she had a bad feeling like we were waking something up, something we barely understood and couldn't control. But still, we pressed on. The days blurred into a mechanical loop of logging data, analyzing samples, arguing over theories. Whatever doubts we had, the work didn't stop. It couldn't. I remember wanting to reach out to someone, maybe a contact at a university, just to get a second opinion. But everything we did was locked down tight. No outside comms. The only line out was the encrypted government channel. And they weren't exactly taking questions. And then it happened. Small, barely a blip at first. We got a fresh shipment of test rodents. One of them had been injected with strain Dr. Vasey had isolated, something he'd flagged for close observation. That afternoon, Nina was running standard checks in the animal containment area. She was suited up, gloves, goggles, lab coat for the works. I was in the next room prepping slides, mind half lost in microscope settings. Then I heard her. A sharp cry came through the intercom. Quick, panicked. I dropped everything and bolted. I found Nina clutching her hand, her face pale. She said one of the infected hamsters had lunged at her. It straight through the glove like it had been waiting. No warning, no hesitation. Well, this one had never shown aggression before. It shouldn't have acted that way. The bite wasn't large, but it was deep. Too deep for comfort. Dr. Nanan came in fast, cleaned the wound, and bandaged her up while barking at the rest of us to tighten our safety protocols. Nina was moved to the medbay and placed under quarantine. Well, of course, we reported it immediately, thinking we got set standard protocols. What we got instead was a cold jolt of unfamiliar orders. Full biological analysis of Nenana, hold all non-essential research and prepare for further instructions. It was the first time we'd heard panic in their voices. Well, we did what they asked. Nina didn't fight it. She was shaken, but steady. We ran the blood work, scans, thermal imaging. For 2 days, nothing changed. No fever, no symptoms beyond soreness in her finger. But the waiting felt heavier than anything we'd faced before. Like we all knew something had already started. We clung to the faint hope that the bite had been a one-off, a fluke. But the lab results crushed that illusion fast. Na's blood markers started to shift, mirroring the same patterns we'd seen in the infected animals. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. The government moved fast. They sent in a shipment of high-priority antivirals from some off-books facility. No instructions, no explanations, just vials and urgency. We were told to administer them immediately. No time to second-guess. Nina was thinking it was just a precaution, though. It wasn't. I remember the silence that wrapped around the break room like a noose. Nobody said it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. Something was seriously wrong. Graham ran constant checks on the internal locks like he was waiting for the place to turn on us. Dr. Vasey buried himself in samples, digging for a way out, a cure, a delay, or anything. Dr. Noonan. She took it all on her shoulders. She gave Nina the injections, monitored her vitals, tried to keep a staple as she faded. Oh, Na was pale now. She'd slowed down and her eyes lost focus, like her mind was slipping somewhere else. By the third night, she was barely responsive, muttering nonsense and flinching at shadows. Dr. Nan checked her vitals and found more changes. Her skin was starting to go rigid, tight in strange patches, like something beneath was pushing out. We moved her to a containment chamber with cameras in every corner. Official orders said keep her under strict observation. No exceptions. It felt like locking up an old friend, but we knew better. Something was growing inside her. I stood with Doctor in front of the observation window, listening to the low, constant hum of the filtration system. Inside, Nina moved like her bones were too heavy. Slow circles, dragging her feet. Her arms hung limp. Her back stayed straight as steel. Then, sometime past midnight, the monitors went haywire. Her heart rate spiked. Neural activity lit up like a storm. We tried to talk to her over the intercom, but no answer. She walked to the window, stared through us like we weren't there. Then she placed her hand on the glass and slowly scraped her nails down the surface. Barely audible, but it chilled the room to silence. Well, we'd seen this before. Agitation without reason, movement without purpose. The same patterns that played out before the animals turned violent. The next morning, we gathered around the main table. Our eyes bloodshot, our nerves shot through. What if Vasey wanted to hit her with another dose? Maybe there was still time. But Nan, she just shook her head. Change had accelerated too fast. Whatever was happening to Nina was past anything we could fix. Well, our data had made it brutally clear. The organism had flooded Na's system. Wasn't just infecting her. It was rewriting her, reshaping the foundation of her biology. I watched the video feed and saw the shift myself. Nina, once sluggish and pale, was now pacing with renewed energy, her movement sharper and more deliberate, like she was hunting for a way out. Part 2. We sent an emergency transmission up the chain requesting immediate evac. Officially, we framed it as a medical emergency, something only top-tier specialists with sealed labs and military-grade containment could handle. Well, the reply came fast. A rescue team would arrive within 48 hours. Well, the speed should have calmed us. Instead, it felt like a delay disguised as a promise. Just another layer to a mystery we still hadn't cracked. Well, before that team ever got close, Na's condition escalated violently. She started slamming her fists against the steel door of the containment unit, smeared her face against the observation glass, eyes wild and empty. We tried sedation, no effect. Noonan, grasping for anything that might slow the process, suggested dropping the temperature in the chamber. Maybe the cold could buy us time. We made the adjustment, and for a few hours, it seemed to work. Nina sank into a corner, her energy dimming like a dying bulb. While she quieted, Dr. Vasey stayed locked in his lab, slicing samples, running tests on the other infected animals. What he found was worse than anything we'd seen before. The creatures weren't just aggressive. They were hard to kill. Resilient in ways that didn't make sense. Oh, and something else. The microorganisms inside them were hijacking basic metabolic functions, turning them into predators driven by one primal urge. To spread, to bite, to infect. Well, it hit us like a hammer. This thing could pass through saliva, through open wounds. Didn't just mutate its host, it weaponized it, made it contagious. I spent a long night in Dr. Nan's office, surrounded by half-lit screens and notes scrolled in panic. She showed me something. Old logs, sealed records from decades past. Early researchers at Palmer Station had stumbled into something similar. A microbe that could spark dead tissue back to life. Well, the project was buried, classified, and erased. The logs ended abruptly, like someone had cut the tape mid-sentence. Whatever they'd found, it had scared them enough to shut everything down and hide the truth. No, we weren't pioneers. We were just digging up someone else's nightmare. Later, in a whispered conversation with Graham, he told me about intercepted transmissions, fragments, broken signals, half-heard orders. He got one phrase again and again though, extreme measures and another extermination protocols. Whatever we were dealing with, they'd known about it and they were ready to erase us if they had to. At first, I wrote it off. Just paranoia, the kind that furs in isolation. But the feeling stuck with me heavier by the hour. Our calls for rescue had been answered too quickly, like they'd been waiting for the alarm to go off, like they already knew exactly how bad things had gotten. The next 48 hours crawled by. Then confirmation came. The Special Operations Unit was en route. They touched down on a makeshift runway a few clicks from the station. Officially, they were here to evacuate us and sanitize potential threats. Well, that word sanitize stuck in my throat. That morning, I woke up running on fumes. Days of stress had stripped me down. I'd skipped meals, lived off coffee and adrenaline. Everyone looked the same, hollowed-eyed and drained. The monitor still showed Nina pacing herself. Her movements were jerky and unnatural. Every now and then, she'd stop dead and stare into the camera like she could see us watching. Then the secure line lit up. A voice, cold, distorted, masked, cut through the static, probably someone from the agency. They told us the rescue team was authorized to enforce full containment protocol, even said it twice. Well, that phrase hit like a punch to the gut. Dr. Noonan asked for clarification and was met with silence. No response, just dead air. Well, that was when we started asking the real questions. Graham was tense and alert and ran a sweep of the perimeter cameras. The feed was half blinded by snow and ice, but we caught the outline of a convoy creeping across the ice field. No visible markings, no insignia, just black shapes moving slow and deliberately. Then everything cut out. Comms went down across the board. Radio, satellite, even the backup relay. Dr. Vazzi tried a manual reset, but it was useless. The Lions were dead. No static, no signal, just gone, like someone had jammed the entire station. We gathered at the main entrance, bracing for a rescue or something else. When the outer doors finally hissed open, they came through like ghosts. Full tactical gear, faces masked, weapons at the ready, no greetings, no questions about our health. One carried a tablet, the rest carried guns. They scanned the room, eyes behind black vices, and asked one thing. How many are still alive and uninfected? Dr. Nan tried to explain, told them about Nina, about the research. They didn't care. They just repeated that question. Graham stepped forward, his voice tight. Who's in command? No answer. Instead, one of them held out a handheld scanner. It beeped slowly, sweeping across the room. They were checking for contamination, checking us. Dr. Noonan kept her cool, though, and pointed them toward the containment chamber. That's when another one stepped up. No introduction, no pleasantries, just a demand. Hand over every scrap of data, samples, logs, and research notes. And the tone was ice cold and final. There was no room to argue here. I led them to the BSL-4 lab myself. Nan stayed behind, unsure of what to make of these silent, heavily armed strangers. Inside the lab, they inspected our containment protocols, took air samples, and swapped surfaces. They didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. Well, it was clear this wasn't a rescue. This was a lockdown. They made us open every locked cabinet, every sealed container that held samples of the microorganism. No hesitation, no ceremony, just orders. They asked precise questions about replication rates, vectors of transmission, using terminology too advanced for outsiders. Whoever they weren't guessing. No, they knew our research inside and out. We caught a glimpse of Vasey leaning in to whisper something to Noonan. Her face shifted, then was tight and pale. Whatever he'd said had rattled her. Once they catalogued everything in the lab, they demanded to see Nina. Well, by then she was sharp and unpredictable, like a predator reacting to phantom sounds. Every creak, every whisper set her off. She bared her teeth at the glass, her jaw twitching with rapid-fire clacks. She tested the barrier, trying to find a weak point. The masked team wasted no time. They deployed specialized gear around the chamber, devices that we didn't recognize. One of them read a weapon, maybe a tranquilizer, maybe something final. No one tried to talk to her. There were no sedatives and no medical evaluation. That's when the truth really sank in. These people were not here to help Nina. They were here to erase her and possibly us. Dr. Afternoon stepped forward, her voice steady, but burning. She told them that Nina could be saved still. We just needed time. We were the closest anyone had come to understanding the organism. With direct access, we could develop a countermeasure. But the reply came cold and clinical. Containment overrides research. End of discussion. Then came the words none of us would ever forget. All compromised personnel must be neutralized. Silence slammed into the corridor like a gunshot. I scanned the masked faces, hoping for even a flicker of hesitation. There was none, just calculated movement, tight formations, clean angles. They took positions at every exit. Weapons lowered but ready. Dr. Vasey, who'd stayed quiet until now, stepped forward. He tried to appeal to reason, argued that destroying the samples would decades of progress. Said we'd already gathered evidence that could change the future of medicine. One of them cut him off, though. We'll handle the next steps. You're no longer essential. Graham leaned in close, hand on my shoulder, voice low. Don't fight them, he whispered. Not yet. His tone made it clear. He didn't think we were getting out of this. Not unless we played it smart. Well, the speed of their operation, the blackout of our communications, and the surgical lockdown of the entire station, this hadn't been a reaction. No, it had been a plan laid out long before we ever called for help. While we scrambled for answers, someone had already decided how this story was going to end. An alarm wailed from the far end of the station and the hallway light snapped to red. Breach protocol. One of the containment zones had failed. Some of the infected lab animals were loose. The leader of the tactical unit didn't waste time. He barked out of command, splitting the squad in two. Half would sweep the station and hunt down anything infected. The rest would stay behind, focused on Na's chamber. Dr. Vasey and I bolted for the lab, our hearts hammering. When we got there, it was worse than we'd feared. 2 red enclosures had been tampered with. One was completely empty. Claw marks ringed the vent near the floor, and a thin trail of blood smeared along the edge. They escaped into the walls. We relayed the news to the masked unit. They didn't flinch, but you could feel it in the air. This wasn't containment anymore. It was now damage control. And then the gunfire started. A sharp pop of a rifle echoed from the direction of the living quarters. One of them had made contact with an infected animal and opened fire. The tension in the station snapped. No one spoke, but the message was clear. We were losing control. And the leader turned to us, his voice flat and final. Any host carrying the microorganism must be destroyed, he said, including your colleague, if she's past the threshold. There was no emotion and no hesitation. He gave us a choice then. Stand down or be treated as threats. Dr. Noonan looked at me and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not panic, dread. Well, she stepped forward, pleading, said we could still try an antidote if we just had more time. But they didn't budge. One of the masked operatives pressed something on a handheld console, and a hiss filled the air as a gas began flooding Na's chamber. Inside, she erupted, screaming, throwing herself against the reinforced walls. Her body slammed against the glass over and over again. Tiny cracks began to spiderweb across the surface. Well, Dr. Noonan tried to stop them, but another operative grabbed her and pulled her back. For a second, the whole world tilted. It was all unraveling fast. They weren't going to wait for science to catch up. To them, Nina was already gone. Just another vector, another risk. And they were here to eliminate risks. And then it happened. A violent crack echoed through the containment area and the glass shattered. Na burst through, bloodied and wild, her movements almost inhuman. She lunged, moving fast, faster than anything I'd ever seen, straight at one of the operatives. They didn't hesitate. The rifle snapped up and a burst of rounds tore into her. She dropped, then twitched. Then the squad leader stepped forward. Karma Stone had fired a single shot from a different device. The kind meant to end things permanently, Part 3. Nina went still. No one said a word. The only sound was a soft fading hiss of gas leaking from the cracked containment system. Her body lay twisted on the floor, motionless. Dr. Afternoon and turned away, fighting to keep herself together. Dr. Vasey looked paralyzed, eyes locked on what was left of Nina. Graham's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white, but he stayed silent. One of the masked operatives stepped forward, checked her vitals, and gave a slight shake of the head. The team leader nodded once. One threat contained. That was it. No ceremony, no remorse. They didn't give us a second to mourn, just barked an order and marched us down the corridor to the station's communal hall. Their boots echoed off the steel floors, a cold rhythm that matched the growing knot in my stomach. Every door we passed slammed shut behind us. Locked, final. One of them carried a metal case. Caught a glimpse inside. Vials neatly labeled with our station's ID codes. The last remnants of the organism. A trophy or maybe evidence. The rest of the unit spread out like clockwork, planting small black devices throughout the station. Didn't say what they were. They didn't have to. Their shape, their placement, it was obvious. Charges enough to burn the place. The leader addressed us like we were items on a checklist. A helicopter was en route, he said, to extract relevant personnel, but only after the station was sterilized. They let that word hang there in the air. And then he dropped the real bomb. He said our exposure to the pathogen made it impossible to guarantee we were uninfected. Translation: we weren't going anywhere. Another operative chimed in, dry and clinical. The official report would state we died during the outbreak. I stared at them, my heart pounding, realizing exactly what this was. They weren't rescuing anyone. No, they were cleaning house. No witnesses, no leaks, no survivors. Graham's eyes met mine. Then we glanced at Dr. Vasey. We were boxed in, but not yet broken. No, not yet. Noonan subtly stepped toward a nearby storage closet, masking her movement as compliance. We all knew what was in there. Tools, gear, maybe even something we could use as weapons. Now, our odds were slim, but not zero. The Mars squad began their final sweep, securing equipment, prepping the last detonations. One of them warned us, stay put. Any escape attempt will be met with force. Dr. Vasey was quiet and calculating and leaned toward me and whispered fast. There was still one way out, a forgotten storage level beneath the old meteorological wing. A maintenance deck that strike team hadn't touched. Maybe they didn't even know it existed. Well, if we could get there, we might be able to move around the locked corridors. Maybe even find a way to disable the explosives or call for help. We just needed a window. Well, it came faster than we expected. Somewhere down the hall, a sensor tripped and a door alarm screamed. Another infected rattled. Maybe a hamster had triggered it. The operatives ratted fast, storming off to neutralize this threat. All but one, that is. One guard remained to keep his eyes on us. Well, that was our moment, and we took it. Dr. Noonan gave a sharp nod to Graham. He got the message and rammed a heavy equipment cart straight into the lone guard. The impact knocked the bastard off balance just long enough and we bolted. Noonan and Park took point, cutting through the corridor with purpose. Dr. Vasey and I were right behind them though, boots pounding on metal. We drove into a narrow service tunnel barely used outside of maintenance runs. Every step down the rusted stairwell echoed like a death nail, and the structure was groaning beneath us. Our flashlight shuddered as we descended, casting broken beams over dust-caked walls and rows of sealed doors. This part of the station was old, forgotten. Over the years, it had been chopped up, expanded, patched with newer systems, but the bones were still here. We found the door we were after. The paint was peeling and the lettering barely legible. Meteorological storage. Inside it was a graveyard of equipment, shelves of obsolete weather tech, crates of yellowed files, and a few portable generators left half buried under tarps. The overhead lights flickered like a dying pulse, and the cold seeped into our bones. Dr. Nan dropped to her knees, digging through crates for anything we could weaponize. Graham fumbled with one of the generators, trying to breathe life into a control console that might let us bypass the station's lockdown or punch through the comms jamming. Above us, we heard movement, footsteps, shouted orders, muffled, but getting closer. Dr. Vasey found a station blueprint. It was faded and brittle. His finger traced a path from our position to a maintenance corridor that's according to the drawing connected to a surface exit. The problem was no one had used it in years. It could be sealed, could be a dead end. But it didn't matter. Staying here was suicide. And so we pushed deeper into the subtle. Dust swirled with every step. Cobwebs breaking across our faces like brittle thread. The hallway narrowed until we reached a dust-covered hatch. Time to find out if the escape route was myth or miracle. Park and I grabbed crowbars from a broken tool locker and forced the hatch open. The metal screeched as the seal broke. Behind it, a ladder stretching upward into freezing darkness. Blast of Antarctic air slapped us right in the face and snowflakes spiraled down from above. Good news, we'd found a way out. Far above, somewhere beyond the vents, we heard them. Boots pounding, metal clanging, faint beeping sounds. They were arming the charges now, and the countdown had begun. Noonan, normally as calm as stone, turned to the rest of us, her eyes fierce, and said, "Climb now." The plan was simple. Reach the surface, loop around the station, hijack one of their convoy vehicles, and get the hell out before the whole place went up in fire and silence. So, one by one, we climbed. Each breath hit the air like smoke, a cloud of panic and frost. Vasey went first. Noon followed, then Park. I waited at the bottom, my flashlight sweeping the dark behind us. That's when I saw it. Movement, subtle, smooth, and deliberate. A figure at the far end of the corridor, stepping through the shadows, masked and armed. One of theirs. They raised their rifle, and I shouted, "Move! Go!" The figure advanced, careful not to rush in the tight quarters. They wanted a clean shot. I bowed up the ladder, my boots slipping on frost-slicked rungs. A round crack through the corridor ricocheted off the wall inches from my leg. We burst out into chaos. The hatch opened into a cramped-out building tucked against a jagged ridge of ice. And beyond that, the storm. The snow howled around us like it was alive. A whiteout devouring the sky. Visibility was, but we were out for now. The wind tore across the ice like a blade, flinging snow in every direction. The sun was a ghost behind thick clouds, casting no warmth, no clarity, just a sickly gray haze. We had no sight line to the main station, only the deep distant thud of explosions as the mass crew laid their charges. Dr. Nan signaled for us to stay tight in the base of a small ridge, hoping to spot the convoy, or if luck still had any meaning, a chopper coming in through the storm. Then, as we crested a rise, we saw them. The convoy vehicles were parked in a wind-sheltered clearing. The engines were still warm. There were footprints everywhere. Ah, they weren't done here. These bastards were planning on leaving after lighting the place up. We dropped behind a thick snowbank, our breath tight and our adrenaline spiking. Graham whispered that he could hotwire one of the trucks if we could get there unnoticed. The storm worked both ways now. It marked us, but it also erased our tracks within seconds. We moved, crawling low, barely more than shadows against the white background. Every gust stung like shrapnel. Noonan scanned the ridge behind us while Vey clutched a salvaged box of gear from the old meteorological storage. Among it, a flare gun. We were almost there. The first truck loomed just ahead, dark and still. And then we heard shouts, muffled but sharp. Two masked operatives near the second vehicle. They spotted us and had their rifles raised. Standoff. Graham ducked behind the fender, fingers ready, working the ignition wires. Dr. Nan raised her hands, calm, trying to stall, but Dr. Vasey hesitated. And then slowly lifted the flare gun. Before anyone moved, the sky lit up. An explosion rocked the earth behind us back toward the station. Fire and debris spewed into the storm-torn sky. A brief inferno swallowed by the cold. The masked soldiers turned, caught off guard. Their operation had started, but ours was about to break. Dr. Vasey fired the flare. It hissed past them and slammed into the ground. And the blast of light and smoke scattered them for just a heartbeat, but that was all we needed. We powered into the truck. Park twisted the wires, cursed, twisted again, and then the engine roared. Bullets peppered the vehicle as we peeled out. Tires slipping on the ice, still whining under the impact. But we were moving. The storm swallowed us whole. But for long minutes, none of us spoke. The only sound was the engine straining and the heater barely pushing back against the deadly chill. Noonan tapped to the dashboard, searching for a radio. Nothing but static. No signal, no backup. Dr. Vey, as he sat hunched at the window, staring out into the white abyss, the reflection of fire still flickering faintly in his eyes. We were alive for now, but the world we'd left behind was already ash. Graham clenched the wheel like it was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. Hell-bent on putting as much frozen ground between us and the smoldering ruins of Palmer Station as possible, I scanned the horizon. Nothing but a dead white void stretching in every direction, swallowing thought and time. In the back of my head, the pieces tried to fit. Nina was gone. The station lightly blown to dust by the charges planted by that massed execution squad. Whatever data we managed to save clung to a few portable drives jammed in a pack at my feet. Whether the rest of our research had been torched or scooped up by the strike team, we didn't know. Either way, it was out of our hands now. We drove for hours, direction more guess than science. Park used a compass and what he remembered from old station maps, guiding us blind through the wasteland. The fuel gauge dipped lower with each mile. But eventually, the landscape shifted, ice giving way to jagged rocks in the distance. The sun was technically setting, but out here that just meant the gray got a little darker. That's when we saw it. A squat where the beaten structure buried against a rock formation. Probably an old expedition shack abandoned decades ago. A leftover from some other doomed crew. We didn't care. It was shelter. We killed the engine and pushed through the wind. Inside was a wreck. Damp, cold, and forgotten. Crates scattered like the place had been looted years ago. Tools rusted to the point of being useless. But in the corner sat an old stove. Ugly thing beat to hell. It might have been salvageable. We drained the last of the spare gas can into it and sparked a flame. It wasn't much, but it was heat. We gathered around like the last survivors of some ancient war. All of our faces drawn and hollow. Dr. Nanan checked each of us. No tremors, no discoloration, no sign the infection had followed us. At least not yet. But it still clung in the air like a shadow. Dr. Vasey sat cross-legged, rubbing his hands together over the small fire. His voice was quiet and heavy. Just days ago, he said he thought he'd cracked the code on aging, on regeneration, on cheating time. But now we were fugitives hunted by the very system we'd been working for. And we didn't know if the outside world had any idea what had happened or if more cleanup squads were coming. We stayed awake longer than we should have, trading theories, trying to hold off the silence. Graham suggested heading for the nearest international base, maybe finding a working radio to reach another station if any were still online. But none of us believed a rescue would come. If the team that hunted us down was government-sanctioned, then we were already ghosts, and ghosts don't get rescued. No one really slept that night. The wind screamed through the gaps in the shack, and the cold was an animal creeping under our clothes, into our bones. We took shifts on watch, peering through a narrow window into the storm, waiting for headlights, the crunch of boots. The end. Well, none of us said it out loud, but we were all thinking it. Na's eyes blank and gone. The team's answer to her, swift, ruthless, and permanent. Whatever we'd unleash back there, wasn't done with us yet. There was always that nagging possibility one of us might already be infected and not know it. The pathogen didn't need much. A touch, maybe a breath, just the wrong moment. Just before dawn, Dr. Noonan dug up an old radio transceiver buried in one of the crates. God, it was a relic probably from the 70s. All dented casing and frayed wires. Still, she and Graham got to work determined to breathe life into the damn thing. If we could get even a flicker of transmission, maybe, just maybe, we could raise another station or catch a signal from a passing aircraft. We spliced what was left of the vehicle's generator into it, praying it wouldn't fry the circuits. Static poured out, the kind that felt like it came from the void itself. We turned the dials, hunting for a voice, a tone, anything human. And then something faint and warped, garbled like it had clawed its way across half the earth to reach us. Dr. Vasey leaned in. He thought he heard a call sign. Maybe Russian, maybe European, could have been a weather report. Even could have been a distress call. It didn't matter. Every time we tried to answer, the damn thing cut out, slipping back into silence. In that hollow lull, Dr. Noonan finally talked, told us how she'd ended up at Palmer Station. She'd been pulled from academia by a black-budget agency no one talked about. Promised answers, breakthroughs, a chance to chase legends buried in the ice. She'd always been fascinated by the whispers of ancient pathogens frozen beneath the poles. Immortality frozen in time, regeneration, power. Now, well, that same dream was eating people alive. Graham said what we were all thinking. The government had plans for this. Backdoor protocols, wipe it all clean, contingencies, and those weren't made overnight. No, someone up top had always known this was possible. Dr. Vasey leaned back, his eyes cold. He said if they destroyed the station already, they'd probably sell it as a mechanical failure, a meltdown, maybe blame the weather. The truth was that they'd pulled the trigger themselves, and that would be buried with the rest of us beneath the polar dark. When the storm broke just enough to let in a sliver of gray light, we packed what little gear we had. Movement. Drive until the gas ran out and then keep walking. We didn't know where the hell we were going, only that we couldn't stay still. Maybe there was another station out there. Maybe someone still human. Someone not in the pockets of the ones who'd sent killers in lab coats to erase us. We left the shack behind. The fire inside had burned down to a whisper. The vehicle sputtered to life, the wheels kicking snow and slush into the wind. And just like that, we were ghosts chasing hope across a dead continent. We moved slowly and deliberately, threading through a frozen maze of creases marked on an old half-faded map. Every hour we tried the radio. Nothing but static and ghosts. The route twisted around towering ridges of ice, jagged and cold, like silent gods watching us crawl beneath them. Eventually, the last drop of fuel coughed through the engine. The vehicle sputtered, choked, and died. We sat in silence, staring into an endless graveyard of fractured ice, knowing we'd have to finish this on foot. No cavalry, no backup, just raw survival. We poured what we could from the wreck. Coats, boots, scraps of food. Dr. Noonan stepped close and slipped a flash drive into my hand. Her face was tight, drawn with guilt and fatigue. "This is everything," she said, her voice barely cutting through the wind. All the data, all the promise and the fallout. The world needs to know. And then we walked. The cold chewed at our bones, and every step felt like dragging dead weight through a frozen hell. Graham took point, compass in hand, muttering bearings to himself. Dr. Vass and Noonan followed, their boots crunching in rhythm. Well, I stayed at the back, my eyes scanning the white void behind us, watching and waiting. Well, we didn't know if the masked bastards were still hunting us. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Either way, the storm had given us cover. If the infection had spread this far, it wasn't showing yet. Not out here. But we all knew it was only a matter of time before it did. One point, we paused for a water break to catch our breath. Noonan stood quietly, staring out over the frozen horizon. The light hit her eyes just right, catching something fragile buried in the ice of her stare. I used to believe in this, she said. Thought we'd end disease, give people more life. Now look at us. Graham tried to offer something like comfort. We couldn't have seen it coming. Not the mutation, not the purge. None of us said the words out loud. Fugitives, targets, liabilities. But the truth hung in the air between our exhales. We were the last thread connecting the truth to the world. And powerful people were counting on that thread snapping quietly in the cold. Our tracks vanished behind us as fast as we made them. The wind wiping the slate clean. The days bled into each other, blurred by frostbite and fatigue. Our rations had dwindled. Basie barely spoke now. His silence wasn't fear. It was just the weight of knowing. Park kept moving, driven by something between instinct and defiance. But even he wasn't sure if we were walking toward salvation or a slow frozen death. Then, when our hope was nothing but frost-bitten breath, the radio sputtered, static, and a whisper, a broken, garbled, but real. A beacon automated and repeating. It was a signal, a station. Somewhere out there in the white wasteland, there was life. It kept looping. Coordinates and a cold mechanical message in a dozen languages. Unmanned weather relay site. Not a rescue, not salvation, but maybe shelter. Maybe a chance to get a signal out that wasn't choked off or intercepted. We changed course. Our boots crunching over the ice, weaving between ridges and frozen chasms. The kind you don't come back from if you misstep. Late in the day, we finally saw it. A thin antenna stabbing up from a ridge. The weather station was nothing more than a steel box bolted into the ice, barely big enough to hold us. Inside, it was tight and rust-stained. Basic instruments, small generator, a radio console that looked like it had been through 2 walls. Graham got it humming again, though, siphoning the last drips of fuel from old canisters stashed in a frozen locker. Static filled the air. Then faint signals crackled through. Just noise and scattered weather reports from places far away. Well, we broadcast anyway. Our location, a request for help. We waited. The minutes dragged. No answer, no voice. Just the same ghostly transmissions cycling on a loop. Still it beat, dying out in the open. We stayed and the relay station gave us steel walls and a roof, however thin. Dr. Noonan took point on the radio, tweaking frequencies, listening and hoping. Dr. Vasey infantry what we had left. A few rations in a dented crate, a half-functional water filter. A slim chance, but better than none. While they worked, I opened the flash drive Noonan had given me. Well, it was all there. Raw files, blood data, behavioral logs, timeline breakdowns. The moment we crossed the threshold from discovery to disaster, notes about the aggression, the cellular transformation, the loss of control, the thing growing inside Nina, and worse, fragments from older logs, data going back decades. Quiet warnings buried in classified documents. Researchers before us had seen this organism. Some tried to weaponize it, others tried to cure with it. None of them made it to a press release. Now, we were next in line. Well, we all carried the weight of what had happened to Nina, to the others, to Palmer Station itself. We weren't just survivors. We were liabilities, witnesses to something the powers that be would never want making headlines. If we ever reach civilization again, maybe we could speak, maybe. But more likely, they'd come for us before that ever happened. The night was brutal. The wind never let up. The metal groaned and shivered like it was alive. Park spent the daylight hours scouting, looking for paths out. Basie stayed buried in the old notes, trying to find something, anything that might matter. Non lived at the radio, cycling through static, trying to punch through to anyone listening. And me. I wrote every hour I could. I recorded it all. The truth is we lived it. Not for glory, not for vengeance, just to leave a trace. Some days it felt like screaming into a void. But other days like it might be the only thing that kept the truth from freezing with us. Well, we heard the planes high up, just shadows against the clouds, too far to help. Not a single one came close. Every time we tried to scream into the open frequencies, all we got was static, dead air, or deliberate silence, as if someone was still jamming us. Or maybe the storm itself was the enemy, drowning our signals in white noise. But we didn't quit. Somewhere beyond this frozen hell, there had to be someone who would listen, someone who would believe us before it was too late. Because the truth is, what we'd uncovered, what we'd unleashed, could still be buried in other glasses, sealed in ancient pockets of ice, just waiting for another set of curious hands to dig too deep. If it gets out again, if it spreads among a larger population, it won't stop. Na's last moments haunt me like a curse. She wasn't just a technician. She was loyal, sharp, one of us. And they had erased her like she was nothing. The masked team didn't ask questions, didn't offer help. They came in cold, clinical, and ready to burn everything down. I replay it constantly how a single bite in a sterile lab kicked off a cascade of violence and infection. One wound, one breach, and suddenly we were watching everything spiral into chaos. It happened fast, too fast. We carry the memory of the fallen. We speak her name when the wind dies down. Nina. Dr. Nuna says it over and over. The data has to survive. Someone has to know. Dr. Vey is already dreaming up a countermeasure. Something we could cook up if we ever reach a real lab again. As for Graham, he's just trying to keep us breathing. And me, I write. It's all I can do now. Document the truth while there's still breath in my lungs and a charge in the battery. The flash drive holds what's left of the science. This holds the soul of it. The station's long gone, reduced to black and steel and scattered bones. But the threat isn't dead. We don't know what the Mars life cultures, raw data. If another outbreak starts, we may not be there to stop it, but we know what it is. And we understand the stakes, maybe more than anyone else on Earth. The organization I was officially working for had bases all over the United States. Who knows how they're involved? Every single day, I remind myself the truth matters more than comfort, more than orders, more than safety. The world needs to know what happened at Palmer Station. Can't just disappear under the ice. Not again. And so if this message finds you, listen, be careful. Don't trust what's frozen. Some things are meant to stay buried. Some discoveries cost too much. This is where we are now. Trapped in Antarctica's endless dark, holding a secret heavier than the ice around us. Survivors of something worse than a nightmare. And only time will tell if we die as witnesses or live long enough to deliver this warning about the silent horror beneath the glasses. The one that brings dead things back and doesn't let go. Oh my dear friends, another zombie outbreak story if you're there. Till the next time, dear friends, you sleep well. Remember, it's just a story. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye bye.